Tell me, is migration becoming a bigger issue today?
Migration is becoming, and it's becoming precisely because of what I mentioned before, is this income divergence between countries. Because what does income divergence mean? It's kind of a big word, but it really means that you have rich countries and poor countries. That also means that even if you're relatively not well off in a rich country, compared to your other fellow men who live, or women, who live in poor parts of the world, you're going to be quite rich. So what does it mean? It means that actually people who live in poor parts of the world would like to come to the rich parts of the world because their incomes might increase by a factor of 3 or 5 or 10. Or to go back to the example between India and the UK, an average Indian who came to the UK would increase his income by 12 times. So that's what is behind this huge pressure on migration that exists today.
So it's not that we're just more aware of economic inequality because we feel the pressure of the poor who are increasingly mobile as they become economic migrants in our countries rather than remaining poor in theirs. But what can be done about it? Specifically, what can you and I do about it today?
Well, you and I cannot really do very much about that because these are things that have to be done essentially by government and by nations and by bilateral or multilateral arrangements rather than bilateral arrangements. So individuals themselves cannot do very much except, as you mentioned before, charity and aid and all of that, but this is really drop in the bucket. Now, to go back just for a question on migration, we have there 3 forces basically that drive it. The one that I mentioned, which is really large differences between incomes, which essentially means that I can recreate myself by moving to a different country and becoming much richer. The second is knowledge about that, which is spread through globalization. And we have seen very clearly how that knowledge travels. If you just look in terms of revolutions in Egypt or Tunisia, clearly people have become much more aware of what is happening elsewhere. So that's the second one, which comes with globalization. And the third one is that transportation costs have now declined. In other words, it's easier and less expensive to try to travel from Tunisia to France than it was 100 years ago or 50 years ago. So these 3 forces are really behind migration.